I thought the sound was gunfire. That's how loud the pounding was. Rhythmic, metallic, and way too close. I shot up from bed, tripped over my dog, and stumbled to the window, still half asleep. What I saw didn't make sense at first. 3 construction workers jamming steel fence posts into the banks of my creek like they were staking a vampire. And there she was, Karen, perched on a folding chair like a vulture in yoga pants, barking orders and sipping a green smoothie the color of swamp muck at 6:45 in the morning. On my land. I opened the window to yell, but she beat me to it. "You're welcome," she shouted. "We're beautifying your swamp." That was the moment I realized Karen had officially declared war on my property, and she brought reinforcements. Now listen, I'm not the type to throw fits about neighbors. The creek behind my house? It's always been a quiet, peaceful spot. It winds through cottonwoods and wildflowers, the same place my granddad taught me to fish and where my dog, Mabel, learned to chase frogs, and miss every single one. But that morning, everything changed. Karen wasn't just being annoying. She was physically fencing off a piece of land she didn't own, as if HOA power gave her the right to put up borders wherever she pleased. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and whether you've ever had a neighbor who crossed a line so hard it felt like a territorial invasion. Because trust me, this wasn't going to be a note-on-the-door situation. This was war. And Karen? She had no idea who she was messing with. I stormed outside in pajama pants and boots, looking like a survivalist who just woke up from a 10-year nap. Karen greeted me with a chipper wave and a laminated packet in hand. "Good morning," she chirped. "This is just a temporary enhancement for HOA-approved beautification. We're making the area more meditative." I blinked at her. "This is my creek." She didn't flinch. Actually, it runs through a communal visibility zone per the HOA's bylaws. And since it lacks structure and flow symmetry, we voted to enclose it for community betterment. Visibility zones? I asked, trying not to laugh. Karen nodded smugly. Page 43. Section 6.2.2. Thing is, I've read the HOA rules. I know them better than she does. Because a few years ago I represented myself in small claims court over a chicken coop. There is no Section 6.2.2. But Karen's confidence was bulletproof, and the worst part? She brought a crew that didn't care whose name was on the deed. They were already halfway through fencing off both ends of the creek, hammering, measuring, installing what looked like anti-tank barriers for water. What happens when the wildlife can't get through? I asked, pointing to a confused-looking family of ducks now stranded on the wrong side. Karen clucked her tongue. "Well then, they'll learn boundaries, won't they?" Mabel barked like she was ready to call in an air strike. I went back inside and grabbed my phone. It was time to call Dean. Dean's a retired game warden who smells like cedar and always carries beef jerky in his pocket. He's my neighbor, fishing buddy, and one of the few people who understands what that creek really means. "You're going to want to come see this," I said. 10 minutes later, he pulled up, and the second he saw the fence, he whistled low. "Holy hell," Dean muttered, stepping out of his beat-up Ford with a chew in his lip. "She fenced off the whole damn thing?" I nodded, arms crossed. "Claims it's for community meditation." Dean chuckled, dark and low. "She's going to need a lawyer and a priest." But then his tone changed. He squatted near the water's edge, pulled out a little magnifier from his vest, and studied the muddy bank like it had just confessed a secret. After a minute, he looked up, eyes wide with something close to panic. "You know what this is? A bad day? No, this..." He pointed at the creek, voice low. "This is a federally protected steelhead spawning tributary. Has been since '94. I used to tag fish here for the state. There are sensors buried up and downstream to monitor flow, sediment levels, and spawning patterns." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means your HOA queen over there just fenced off a federally monitored habitat. That's not just illegal, it's felony level illegal." We both turned to watch Karen directing a worker to install a faux bamboo trellis over the creek like she was turning it into a spa, not interfering with a natural ecosystem. Dean stood slowly, all calm fury. "You need to call Fish and Wildlife." Today, I didn't waste time. I emailed the regional enforcement office, attached photos, GPS data, and a video of Karen dramatically shooing away some kids who came down to look for tadpoles. By sundown, they'd replied. The message was short but heavy. Thank you for the report. Our agents are aware of the site and will conduct an investigation immediately. Any obstruction of federally protected waterways is subject to enforcement under Title 16 of the U.S. Code. Karen had no idea what she'd done. The next morning, Karen did what Karen always does when challenged. She escalated. Like clockwork, she hosted what she proudly called the Creekfront Visualization Initiative. A dozen guests arrived in white linen, carrying crystals and folding chairs. They meditated in a half circle around the newly installed Serenity fence, now adorned with hanging lanterns, a wind chime shaped like a lotus flower, and little wooden signs that said things like flow, not force. One woman actually asked if the creek had healing properties. Karen, dead serious, nodded. It used to, but I'm cleansing it from the chaos now. That was it. I was done watching the HOA's rogue spiritual leader redecorate an endangered ecosystem like it was her personal yoga retreat. That evening, Dean and I walked over around dusk, just as the last of the linen-clad crowd floated off in Priuses. I approached with my hands in my coat pockets, calm as I could be. Karen, I said, you need to take the fence down before it's taken down for you. She laughed in my face. You can't do anything. The HOA owns a community aesthetic, and that includes the creek. I raised an eyebrow. Even if it's federal land? She paused. Just a flicker. Then Dean stepped in, holding up a laminated photo of a steelhead trout tag with a GPS tracker. Congratulations, he said with a grim smile. You just blocked a federally protected migration path. Karen blinked like someone had unplugged her brain mid-thought. No, that's not, there's no way. I read this is private property. Not anymore, I said, already walking away. Behind us, Karen stood frozen in place, smoothie glass shaking just slightly. She still thought this was a game. She didn't know the feds were already watching. 2 days later, the fence was still up, and so was Karen's ego. If anything, she'd upgraded. A new sign had been staked at the creek's edge. Private reflection area, HOA access only. She'd added 2 folding chairs and a cheap stone fountain that burbled awkwardly into a plastic bucket. It was clear she believed she was winning some kind of spiritual turf war. And in her mind, she was the undisputed goddess of it all. What she didn't know was that she'd attracted the attention of people who weren't coming to sip green smoothies. Early that morning, Dean called me, barely able to contain his excitement. They're coming, he said. Fish and wildlife. Your photos triggered something big. He was right. Around noon, a white unmarked SUV rolled into the neighborhood. It passed Karen's house once, circled a cul-de-sac, then stopped a few houses down from mine. Out stepped 2 men and 1 woman, dressed like biology professors on vacation. Khakis, utility vests, serious faces. I stayed on the porch, pretending to trim hedges. Dean stood across the street, pretending to re-rig his fishing rod. The agents approached the creek casually, like bird watchers, until they saw the fence. One of them actually muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Karen must have spotted them through her window because seconds later, she came marching out like she owned not just her house, but the whole zip code. "Can I help you?" she asked, planting herself in their path, clipboard in hand, and that trademark step-forward smile. One agent flashed a badge. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, ma'am. We're responding to a reported obstruction of a federally protected waterway. Karen snorted. This is HOA-regulated land. You need clearance from the board. The female agent didn't blink. We're responding under the Endangered Species Act, and that trumps your HOA. Karen's face did something strange then, twisted somewhere between outrage and disbelief, like someone had just told her Whole Foods was closing. That little puddle doesn't even run year-round, she snapped. The female agent didn't flinch. This puddle, she said coolly, is a registered spawning site for Oncorhynchus micus, an endangered species of steelhead trout. Any obstruction of their habitat is a federal offense. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but before she could conjure more nonsense, The male agent nodded upstream. "Your supervisor's already watching," he said. Sure enough, further up the creek was another agent, quietly snapping photos and scanning the sediment near where the fence posts. Karen didn't know where to look. Then came the part I'll never forget. The agents didn't wait. They walked directly into the creek side area and began dismantling the fence, piece by piece. One used a bolt cutter. Another cataloged the materials. The third pulled out what looked like an antenna, and within seconds, it started beeping. The female agent held it up. "You hear that? That's one of the buried transmitters. Your fencing triggered a data disruption. We logged it last week." Karen's face drained of color. "No one told me there were transmitters." "You didn't ask," the agent replied. By now, half the neighborhood had taken notice. People hovered near mailboxes, peeked through blinds, watered already soaked lawns just to get a front row seat. Karen tried a last stand. "You're destroying property the HOA paid for." One agent didn't even look up. "That'll be factored into the fine." Then Karen made her fatal move. She lunged, grabbing the bolt cutters from the agent's hand. "You can't take this down. It's part of my design." They calmly took the tool back, informed her that interfering with a federal investigation was another charge, and called the sheriff. By the time the county sheriff rolled up, Karen was mid-rant about government overreach and spiritual vandalism. She was politely escorted to her front door and warned any further interference, and she'd be arrested on the spot. By late afternoon, the fence was gone. In its place stood a simple white sign: "Federal property, do not disturb." A few small metal stakes marked the monitoring points, glinting in the sun like tiny victory flags. That night, the HOA called an emergency meeting, and for the first time since Karen's reign began, the board actually listened. Turns out, they'd had enough of the drama, the fines, and the sudden unwanted attention from federal agencies. Several board members resigned on the spot. Karen was temporarily suspended pending investigation, which everyone knew was code for "start packing." I didn't say much at the meeting. I didn't need to. The creek was back, the fence was gone, and Karen's chokehold on the neighborhood had finally cracked. Dean toasted me later that night with a warm beer and a crooked grin. "You know what the best part is?" he asked. "What?" "This isn't even over yet." He was right, because when Karen loses, she doesn't reflect. She retaliates. Within 24 hours, she'd lawyered up a bright blue Tesla with tinted windows and license plates that read bylaw unrolled into her driveway the next morning. Out stepped a man in a lavender suit, hair slicked back, teeth like polished marble. Bryce Hawthorne, according to the HOA rumor mill. He made a fortune defending shady developers and suing cities over hedge height regulations. He marched into the clubhouse with Karen at his side, binder in hand, and announced their intent to sue for unauthorized government intrusion and emotional damages caused by environmental interference. It was absurd. It was theatrical. It was so Karen. 2 days later, I got a letter, certified, gold-inked envelope, hand-delivered to my porch like a royal decree. Inside, a formal grievance from Karen. She accused me of colluding with outside authorities to undermine local governance, and this part still makes me laugh, of endangering the peaceful energy of the community. She also requested a restraining order, claiming my proximity to the creek caused her hydration imbalance. I poured myself a drink and waited for the court date. It came fast. Within 48 hours, we were scheduled for a hearing at the county courthouse. Not a full trial, but enough to draw a crowd. Karen arrived in a white pantsuit and an American flag scarf, looking like she was running for president of the HOA nation. Bryce followed close behind, briefcase swinging, radiating the smug confidence of someone who once sued a fire station for 2 bright sirens. The judge, Rosalind Keene, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, not here for theatrics. Bryce opened with a speech that sounded like a campaign ad. He accused Fish and Wildlife of fabricating data, claimed the creek was spiritually stagnant, and implied federal agents had personal vendettas against decorative fencing. Karen nodded along dramatically, holding up photos like crime scene evidence. One of them showed me fishing. She called it proof of territorial aggression. Then it was my turn. I handed over the email from Fish and Wildlife, my deed, and the official documents designating the creek as protected habitat. The judge raised an eyebrow and turned to Bryce. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, "are you aware this stream is on the Federal Endangered Species Registry?" Bryce adjusted his tie. "Your Honor, that registry is outdated. It was updated last year." I cut in. Judge Keene nodded, flipping through the documents. "And your client submitted HOA forms claiming control over land that's not even hers." Karen started to sputter. The judge raised a hand. "Ma'am, this is a hearing, not a town hall. Please sit." That's when the judge brought in the big guns. She invited a representative from Fish and Wildlife to testify. I had known they'd show. But when the agent stepped forward, wearing the same windbreaker from the creek inspection, I could feel the air shift. Calm. Precise. She laid it all out. How Karen had driven metal stakes into a spawning ground, blocked access to native fish, tampered with buried sensors, and disrupted federal monitoring equipment. Even Bryce stopped smiling. But the agent wasn't done. She talked about the concrete poured near the bank, the non-native plants, the decorative rocks, the bamboo trellis. All of it was unauthorized, all of it potentially damaging, and all of it documented. Karen tried to interrupt, but I didn't know. No one told me. "You were told," the judge said, "the day the fence was taken down." Silence. The decision came fast. The judge ruled in my favor. Restraining order? Denied. Karen? Ordered to cease and desist from touching the creek ever again. Any further interference? Automatic referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Then came the cherry on top. Karen was slapped with a $45,000 fine, not just for the ecological damage, but for the illegal use of HOA funds. The fence, the events, the attorney, none of it had been voted on. I don't think Bryce even moved. Karen's face turned 5 shades of white before settling on a shade of pure rage. Outside the courthouse, Dean patted me on the back. That went about as well as a creek blessing with dynamite. Karen stormed to her Tesla, peeled out a lot, and screamed something that might have been "this isn't over," as she fishtailed onto the road. And for once, she was right, because when Karen's backed into a corner, she doesn't apologize. She gets weird. After the courtroom blowout, Karen vanished for a bit. No morning yoga grunts, no HOA emails about patriotic bunting violations, just silence. I'd almost started to feel sorry for her. Almost. Then came the smell. It crept in one morning, chemical, bitter, fake, as if someone had bottled the Nile and tried to scrub the air with it. The source? A fresh cement wall across the creek's bend. Sloppy, still damp. Nearby, busted cinder blocks, a repurposed mop bucket labeled water flow redirector, and footprints leading straight from Karen's backyard. She tried to reroute the creek. At night, in secret, wearing night vision goggles, a headlamp, and what looked like a hazmat suit from a Halloween store. The trail, Cam caught the whole thing. And yes, she was singing a remix of the national anthem. My creek, my rules, it was unhinged theater. Fish and Wildlife showed up the next day with backup, 2 agents, a chemist, and a rep from the state. They removed the concrete, took soil samples, and showed Karen the footage on a tablet. She stared open-mouthed, then spiraled into a rant so off the rails it paused the squirrels. She demanded a lawyer, then a medium, then said she was testing erosion control products. None of it worked. She was formally arrested. The footage leaked. Not by me. Someone on the community board posted it with the caption, "When HOA power goes full supervillain." It went viral. Reddit, Twitter, late night TV. Hashtags. Hashtag Creek Karen. Hashtag ConcreteGate, and my personal favorite. Hashtag Wet Cement Energy. The HOA voted to ban her from meetings permanently. Her flamingos were removed ceremonially. But then, nature delivered the final twist. During cleanup, we found an old stone Karen had knocked loose. Underneath, a rusted hatch. Inside, documents, maps, coins, proof of an old mining claim, federal water rights, and a protected status even deeper than before. Karen had tried to conquer the creek, and in doing so, she made it untouchable.